Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Well, Karen Eber, welcome to the show. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. We're so happy to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Yes. You are the CEO and chief storyteller of a consulting firm. I believe you categorize it as a consulting firm that bears your name, which is super. I'm assuming that's on purpose. That's not coincidental. And you're also the author of a book called The Perfect Story.
Yeah.
Right. And today we're going to talk about kind of your body of work and how storytelling can be so instrumental and impactful in the workplace, but also throughout our lives. Is that what you'd like to talk about today, since that's what your book is about?
I would. You got it right on. Exactly. Yeah. Let's tell some stories.
Good. I love telling stories. And I think I love hearing stories almost more than I love telling stories, to be honest with you. But yeah, so your whole living is teaching corporations. When I say corporations, if you go to your website, I said this in pre-show, you've got some pretty big logos on there. I mean, when I say big logos of pretty big companies that you have consulted with, provided education for. And so why is a corporation engaging with your services around storytelling? How does that even happen?
Sometimes that's not the entry point. Sometimes it is, we want to make our leaders connect with their teams better, or we want to help people be more memorable communicators. But more and more it is, how do we create these better connections? How are we using stories to talk about our data, to connect when we're in a hybrid environment? Like, how do we just be less robotic and more human in this age of AI? And those are my favorite, because they already recognize that this is something that can really help influence behavior and thinking and decision making. And it also minimizes confusion. So it's happening more and more. And those are my best days.
That's very cool. And so when I was a kid, let's say, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe I wanted to be an astronaut, maybe I wanted to be a firefighter. I don't know that being a storyteller was even in my repertoire of things that I wanted to be when I grew up. So how on earth did you end up making your life's work about storytelling?
Like most things, I backed into it and didn't realize that's what I was doing until enough people said it to me. I have always been in the space of making work better. And so I always thought of my work as leadership development. But I've always been in these roles where I was trying to get approval for training or investment for technology or something. And very few people had the ability to say yes, but everyone around me could say no. And I'd start to tell stories to slow down all of those no's and get some of those no's to influence the people that could say yes. And over time, I started to recognize, it's so much more interesting to listen to a story, just like you said, than it is to 4 people one meeting at a time. And I started to get asked really frequently, how are you doing this? And how can I tell stories better? And what can happen? And so I went from doing to sharing and breaking it down for people and helping people recognize it's not just enough to tell a story. The way you tell it is going to make a difference in how it's experienced. And so helping show people the science behind it and what's going on in your brain, and how do you factor that into your stories to make them more interesting.
And when we look back at just human history, I guess, human history, storytelling is at the very, very basis of everything that we know today, I would say, right? I mean, and so when you think of storytelling, like if I say the word storytelling, to me, I might think about telling a story to my kids or sharing, a funny anecdotal thing that I did, haphazardly or something to make somebody laugh, for connection, for entertainment, right? But when you think of storytelling with your background, how do you see storytelling?
All of the above. To me, story is it's a unit of understanding. whether that is when you're with friends at dinner and you're talking about your latest adventure or something embarrassing that happened, or you're trying to influence a customer or a client to maybe take a choice or buy something that you do, or you're presenting data and you want people to understand it and have a different type of discussion, or you're going to give a wedding toast and you want to figure out how do you celebrate the couple, like all of the above. It's just how are you communicating in a way that is dynamic and memorable and interesting.
And you said something interesting there, which was, which again, lends, that's why I wanted your definition. You said story, and I put a hyphen, unit of understanding. So actually that's almost like a scientific term, right? A unit of understanding. So story equals, or is in relationship to, a unit of understanding. I've really shifted my mindset, and I'd love your input on this. I've shifted my mindset on Zoom meetings, right? Because we have obviously we have lots of Zoom meetings now, and I have more remote team than I used to ever have. And I'm part of a remote team. And so in the beginning, like when, COVID was here and I was working literally out of my house, everything was very like tuck. I mean, it was just like, we just needed to get stuff done. Let's crunch it. And then as it's kind of evolved, even in this last couple of months, I went, we've got these rhythm meetings and we're coming into a space. It's okay to not have it be quite so agenda driven. It's okay to spend some time chit-chatting, right, about the weekend or Father's Day or a kid's birthday. That's healthy. And I started, instead of looking at it as meetings, I started really looking at, this is just collaboration time, right? This is, we're not, especially the ones where we're like meeting multiple times a week, the team to work on specific projects. It's like, this is just really work time together. And so it became we started to shift to kind of like, we would just start working on stuff, and sometimes we're talking and sometimes we're not, but we're just kind of hanging out sometimes during that hour, and we're pulling up stuff. Hey, I've got a question on this, but it became less about the getting everything checked off, to more of, no, this is just a work time like we would have if we were at the office. If we were at the office and we were hanging out, we'd just start collaborating. So how do we kind of start just having space to collaborate? So I guess from your professional or personal experience, kind of how have you seen that? How are you seeing that play out in the new virtual world?
I think each team has to figure out, when do they need to come together, and come together doesn't necessarily mean in person, but
right,
when and how, which to me was the opportunity through all of these years where changes were introduced to really think about, like, what is meaningful and working? Are we having these meetings because they're actually producing something helpful for all of us, or we're having them out of habit?
right.
And part of it is, some teams do want to have that, like, let's just have dedicated time where we're all on the line together so we can check in with each other. And others felt like, no, we're going to eliminate our meetings, or we're going to stack all our meetings on one day and come in the office and do that. And the rest of the time, it's shifting how we interact. And those that aren't taking advantage of that are shortchanged. So all of these, like, get back into the office mandates are, to me, real estate decisions and not productivity decisions. It's an excuse for, are we teaching people to lead in all environments? And are we teaching them to think about what is the most helpful thing that's needed in a situation? Because forcing people to, sit in a car and commute just to sit in a room and do something that they could have done over Zoom, like, that's not helpful either. So I do think it's an opportunity to stop and think and create space where it doesn't all have to be agenda driven, with one caveat that there's really interesting research on the continuum of introvert through ambivert to extrovert, that the introverts derive different energy from interaction. So many extroverts derive that energy from the processing, the being around each other, the socializing. Doesn't need to have a specific topic. It's just the act of that interaction. But for introverts, what the research is saying is that the meaning really matters. So small talk is very draining because it feels fluff and meaningful. Like, I don't want to talk to you about the weather. I could care less. Don't waste my time on that. But let's talk about something that does feel meaningful. And that could be really impactful. And so to me, this question of collaboration and stuff is some of those norms of what is most meaningful for people, or is it there's absolutely no meaning in this time, we're just going to have it
Right.
and, work if you want, speak up if you want. But that's, I think, I think some of the drains that happened when we were all on cameras all the time, and is there was a lot that was felt like forced fun, or felt like forced exercises that could be draining.
Karen, thank you so much for coming on the program today and on the podcast. I certainly appreciated visiting with you. It was a pleasure, and I really enjoyed our time together today.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes. And how to, so your website, let's just put it on here just in case we don't get it in the show notes for some strange reason, is just Karen, just like it sounds, EBER, Eber.com, KarenEber.com. And it's got you and your story and what you do and about the book, right? It's got your book stuff on there. So all things, is that where it's best? Any social media?
That is the best way. Yep. That's the best way to get to me. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciated your time, and I look forward to visiting in the future if hopefully our paths will cross again someday.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thanks.